It's my great privilege today to reflect upon one of the more famous stories in the gospel tradition and during the season of Advent, the story of St. Joseph, where he suddenly discovers that his wife Mary is pregnant and not by him, from the Gospel of Matthew chapter 1. And so certainly we can look at this particular story from a strictly literal perspective, right? And so certainly there was a St. Mary, there was a St. Joseph. Mary did conceive by the power of the Holy Spirit. Joseph indeed was tempted to send Mary away quietly, but then was ultimately convinced not to do so through the intervention of an angel. Now that said, obviously we can look at the same story as sort of a spiritual analogy, right? Because if you think about it, how many times do we find ourselves precisely in a situation of St. Joseph, where we're trying to be righteous, we're trying to live a good life, and maybe a holy life on top of that, but at the same time, suddenly we encounter unexpected, confusing, and painful circumstances, where we too are tempted to send Mary away quietly, in a sense of giving into a certain sadness and despair, because on some level we have rejected the life that God has given to us. The challenge, if you will, is to remember that God's grace and power are actively at work both in the beauty and tragedy of life. And to remember the words of St. Paul, letter to Romans chapter 8, all things work together for the good for those who love the Lord. Now, practically speaking, something we might do as sort of a spiritual exercise is to listen again to the words of the angel to St. Joseph, but to substitute the word Mary with wherever is troubling us in the moment. Again, some confusing, unexpected, painful experience which we don't really think is compatible with God's love for us in the present moment. Trusting and believing that if God permits this particular circumstance to arise in our lives, ultimately is meant to be conducive to our holiness and the salvation of the world. And so with that, let us listen again to the words of the angel to St. Joseph. Joseph, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife. The child conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you will name him Jesus, for he will save people from their sins. And may God bless you all.